And Aaron, we can just wait a minute or so and let people trickle in. Okay, Aaron, I think you can go ahead.
Great. Thank you all for being here. And for those of you who are watching the recording at some day in the future, thank you for taking the time. Um, I'm Erin Craig, and I am 3 Degrees Chief Sustainability Officer, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the final event of our Climate Day program. This has been a first time for us. It's been a program that's been ongoing today since about 1 o'clock in the morning Pacific time, as we've had sessions focused on the Asia Pacific market, the European market, the North American market, on removals and on agriculture. And then our final session here focuses on the sustainability role in a larger way. Um, so thank you for taking the time to spend with us. I have a couple of logistics. First, you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you'll see both a chat function and a Q&A function. If you are experiencing a problem with the webinar itself, or have a technical question, or want to direct something to our support team, please use the chat. If you have a question or a comment you'd like to make about what we're talking about, please use the Q&A function. The Q&A we will be collecting and curating as we go, and then we'll take a pause and take questions at a certain point during the webinar. So please, as you have them, right, get them out of your mind and onto the Q&A function, and we can take them from there. With that, let me do the briefest of introductions of our panelists, and then I'll pass it to them to say a few words more. I'm joined by, let's see, I'm going to do it as it is on the screen here, Andrea Osika from Nutanix, with Chris Pennington from Iron Mountain, Joel Demerit from Trek Bikes, and Julia Shapiro from Aloha. So why don't we go right in that order? Andrea, do you want to tell us just a little bit more about your role?
Sure. It's great to be here, by the way. Thanks for having me. I work for a company that's called Nutanix. We're a growing company, but we basically work as a software company to take the complexity of data centers and clouds and hybrid multi-clouds and just simplify it and make it easy for our customers so they can focus more on business outcomes. We're a medium-sized company based in the United States. Last year we did around 2 billion in revenue, but we have 7,000-ish employees, and we're all over the world. It's nice to be here. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah. Hey, it's great to be here. I'm Chris Pennington. I lead up energy and sustainability for Iron Mountain Data Centers. We build, own, and operate data centers in markets all around the world. And we're a part of the larger Iron Mountain brand that folks may know for other information and asset protection services. So I live in Oregon, and I'm just happy to be here. Thanks.
Joel?
Hi, so my name is Joel, a part of Trek Bicycle Company. We make bicycles and cycling products, and then also operate a very large retail footprint. So we have directly owned stores. We have about 200-300 stores, and we have thousands of independent dealers as well. So we're a private company, about 7,000 employees, and about 2 billion in revenue. What I do for them is handle energy, materials, and reporting, compliance, carbon accounting, that sort of thing. So.
Great. And Julia.
Hi, great to be here. I'm Julia. I am the VP of Brand and Content for a company called Aloha. We make organic, plant-based protein powders, drinks, and protein bars. And we are a privately owned company. There's about 22 of us right now. So small but mighty. We're fully remote, so distributed all across the US. And something that I think is kind of cool about us, we're privately owned, but we're also employee owned and operated. So everybody, all 22 of our employees own part of the business. So there's some shared skin in the game, shared success in that, which has been a really successful model for us. And as of last year, we're about 100 million in revenue.
Small but mighty indeed. Well, great. Just let me tell the audience what it is we're going to do. I'm hoping that we have a little bit of an actual conversation here, and so we've agreed on some topics, some themes that I'll introduce, and then I'll hand it to one of our panelists, and we'll begin a conversation. And like any conversation, if we talk over each other a little bit, we'll, apologies in advance, but that just means we're excited to talk about the topic. So and then we'll pause after a few discussion topics and take a look at the Q&A, and Caroline Lewis, our marketing manager off stage, will be curating those and letting us know the sort of hot topics that people would like us to talk about in the Q&A. So with that, let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is especially since we have such you all represent companies at very different stages of sort of growth and maturity and different markets, very different markets, right? But you're all deeply engaged in sustainability inside your companies. So my question is, how does that come about in your business, right? How did your company decide to take on sustainability as either a key part of its business model or important enough, right, to have people like yourselves working on it? And was that original impetus? Is that different from how it is today, or is it still the same? And how do you see your role in contributing to the company today? And with that, Joel, why don't you get us started?
Thanks for the question, Aaron. So the kind of the background of like what is sustainability and what is the motivation at Trek, first off is like maybe the motivation, and that's because we're a private company, our leadership has, a very high level of passion and wants to see action on this front. And then also, I think there's what they see as a very big amount of inaction by the remainder of industry and by policymakers around the world that really needs to be addressed. And so we want to lead by example, and we kind of split our efforts up into two things. One would be products and operation, and the other would maybe be advocacy. So products and operation would be like changing the materials and the energy that flows through our operational footprint to be cleaner. That's mostly measured by carbon accounting and LCA. Most of our goals right now are carbon goals. We have pretty substantial efforts in material sourcing, energy sourcing, extending our product life cycle, and helping to dispose our products responsibly. So, we put a lot of effort into making our own bikes, making our own product stores cleaner. But, I think Trek in the grand scheme of the world is relatively small, and we recognize that. And so the other side of our sustainability story is advocacy, and where the largest emission category in North America is in transportation, specifically in like light vehicle road transportation. So, the bicycle is a simple solution to complex problems. And while it may not solve every transportation problem, it can solve quite a few of them. So, urban sprawl, health issues, transportation safety, there's a lot to be said for cycling as transportation as a sustainability thing. So in response, Trek has donated over $24 million over the last 10, 20 years or something like that, forwarding better places to ride and getting kids on bikes. So, really trying to change transportation in that way, making the US in particular a better place to have cycling as transportation. So,
Julia, do you want to you're also in a consumer space. Do you want to talk about how sustainability arose at Aloha?
Yes, this is an interesting one for us because sustainability was sort of built into the DNA of the business, quite simply because we chose the name Aloha. Like that was the impetus for it, because there's really, for those of you who don't know, Aloha is a greeting in Hawaii, but also has like very deep cultural significance. As a word, there's something called the spirit of Aloha in Hawaii. And basically, it encompasses this idea of interconnectedness between yourself, the people around you, your community, but also the planet. And so that in and of itself, like created this really beautiful framework for us to operate from. And in order for us to have this name and to kind of go out there with it every day, we take it as a responsibility to make sure we're living up to that. So when we first started the business, this was like very much a conversation that we had as we were building out our values, is how do we make sure that we're, not taking more than we're giving back? And how does that come to life in this industry that we serve, which is food? And it started with the food. It started with how do we develop a food philosophy that lives up to this? So it was about healthy food. It was about making food accessible to people. It was about making healthy food affordable to people. And then I think one step further, thinking about that impact on the planet, it was really important for us from day one that all of our products are USDA organic, because we just felt like those practices were better for the planet. And so that was something we said, that's a non-negotiable. Everything we make is going to be organic. Our drinks are fair trade. And overall, we just focus a lot on like transparency and responsible ingredient sourcing. And there's always room for improvement. Like we get our ingredients from all over the world. I would love to tell you everything is made in Hawaii, but it's just not the case because of supply chain constraints. But what it's done is created a really good framework for us to make decisions and kind of this like all-encompassing brand system that we try to live up to with the name.
I think it's interesting to see a bit of the evolution that I've seen in this kind of professional role that's happened over the last few years, where I think it largely began as a way, and both Joel and Julie mentioned this, to connect with people and like have a program at a company that connected to people's values. And so I think it was very kind of value oriented, and that's all very positive and good and still exists today. And yet, what I loved about what Joel said specifically was I think it has matured into, hey, we can use these values that we have to help solve bigger problems. And I think that's the really cool opportunity in the space today. My background with Iron Mountain goes back many decades and really have nothing to do with sustainability intentionally. But I was drawn into this type of role because of my own personal values, and now I'm excited about the opportunity to use our knowledge and skills and resources to solve real problems, which for the data center business means how do we focus on clean power? How do we focus on delivering a more sustainable digital future? And so I think there's been a bit of a transition, but I think it's all those pieces are still there today.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And Chris, we're kind of in the same space. What we do is dependent on data centers and kind of the very nature of what we do. And I could go down a deep technology dive and you guys would all be rolling your eyes, but we make it so much more simpler where companies can save space and energy in the data center. And so the nature of what we do is somewhat sustainable, but right now we're in the same boat as you, where we're looking at ways to, especially with Gen AI and that huge environmental impact. I don't know if people are aware of this, but data centers and network transmission is responsible for almost 2 to 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that rivals the aviation industry. So definitely customers look to us to try and find ways to help reduce, their emissions. And then us as a company, obviously, you know, people are looking to us to see what we're doing as an organization.
Well, on that note, what's on your list this year? What is taking a lot of your time and energy, Andrea, for as your launch? Was going to say launching, but the fact is, it's already March as you're proceeding through your 2025 list.
Yeah, I mean, besides trying to keep up with all the global regulation, what I find myself spending a lot of time on is just looking for ways to be both ourselves and our customers to be more efficient, right? And so at my company, at Nutanix, you know, we're looking at ways to reduce our footprint and constantly looking for ways that are really realistic, that are something that you can take and apply. Because we're not a manufacturer, I mean, we're a software company. We are really, really efficient already. We, of course, use our own technology, so to try and drive, you know, additional efficiencies has been really challenging and interesting. But when I stop to think about those interventions that are kind of what we consider low-hanging fruit, it's clean energy. Obviously, it's something that is, you know, I don't want to say simple, but out of all of the problems that we look at, just identifying ways for clean energy that can be implemented both for ourselves and for our customers.
I'll build on that because I feel like I'm naturally connected to Andrea here, being the data center provider. Like we are the physical space in which they, you know, companies like Nutanix exist and operate. And so where I'm focused right now for this year in particular is really understanding with better, you know, data completeness, like what is the real emissions footprint of that facility? What does that really look like? So I think it's a normal journey to begin from a greenhouse gas kind of a tracking standpoint. Start with your scope 1, start, you know, your scope 2, understand that, then venture into scope 3, which is a really big thing and like really hard to get your arms around. And that's the focus for me personally right now is to really help us identify what the true kind of comprehensive footprint of the physical building is. And it's not just academic. It's you know, it's similar to what we saw in the clean energy space, where we've been matching all the power that we buy with clean energy contracts since 2017. So we've been doing renewable power for a long time, and yet there was still opportunity once we really understood it matters where and when clean energy goes onto grids and how we consume that on an hour by hour basis. And so we set our hourly matched clean energy goal a couple of years ago based on knowing kind of where we were in the journey. So for me, it's now kind of moving to our emissions or embodied emissions of our buildings and seeing how we can really understand it better so we can make that next leap in terms of supporting lower carbon products and solutions that make sense.
Joel, what are you up to this year?
Well, I think it's just a note on energy because that's something that's we have a very, very distributed supply chain. And so, you know, like I think I'm very inspired when I see these large commercial customers that come through and they are basically giving utilities and power generators or renewable energy, you know, equipment suppliers, those kind of like big customers that can, you know, like stabilize demand and really help to lower costs for everyone and get a lot of like implementation in place. So it's really great to see that. And I feel like that's something that's desperately needed across the data center space. I mean, you're starting to see a lot of some of kind of like the FANG companies say they're going to build nuclear reactors and this, that, and the other. And so, I mean, it's good to see that they're responding to their own energy demand. So I guess that's good. Stuff that we're working on is materials. Our main source of emissions is the materials that go into our bicycles, and a large part of that is metals, specifically aluminum. And so something that we've begun to do is implement a sourcing policy that identifies good and bad aluminum, and then we, you know, slowly go through and shift all of the good or all of the bad into good aluminum to reduce our emissions for a very wide range of our products.
Julia?
Yes, I'm vigorously nodding when Joel said materials. Because it's the same for us. I would say honestly, our white whale right now is wrappers. As somebody who's in the food industry, we've made some like really great strides. We've been able to switch all of our cartons to recycled cardboard. We've swapped our powder cartons to recycled materials as well. But there hasn't been a lot of progress in creating a fully recyclable wrapper for bars. And this is challenging on a few different levels because a lot of it has to do with food safety, like to really get into it. And how do you make sure that your product stays fresh, which is important for us because our products are shelf stable, but because they're organic, they don't have a ton of preservatives on them. So, we have to make sure that they stay good. And then also just make sure the food is safe for people. So there's a lot of people working on this, and I'm hoping that there's advancements. If anybody on this call has any ideas and wants to share it with me, a lot of the focus with other companies or in the industry has been about offsetting and actually removing waste as a way to kind of balance that, which I think is a good first step. But in order to make like some serious strides, we do need to crack it. To be honest, it's sort of the thing that keeps me up at night. So that's big on my list, hopefully this year, but sometime soon.
Would you say that you are well integrated in that mission, right? You're trying to find better materials for your bar packaging, that you're well integrated into the design teams that are working on that as well, and the sourcing. Are you part of that ecosystem?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is sort of the beauty of being 22 people as well, is everybody inevitably is in everybody else's business. A lot of the calls we have about sustainability have a representative from every aspect of the business. So it's shared ownership, even though it sits within the brand team. Our team's working with the supply chain team or the product innovation team, vetting calls, finding new partners, finding new vendors. And we do have a really nice community as well of brands kind of our size in the food category, because there's so many people in this scale up stage right now who are also trying to do the same. And I do think that there's been a bit of a shift. Like for a long time, it's been, well, let's make it big food's problem. Let's let the big food companies solve it. They have all the money, they have all the resources. And I think that's the pendulum starting to swing a bit. And you're seeing more of these like smaller to mid-sized brands coming together to say, actually, we're employee owned. We're not a public company. We have the flexibility to make the decisions about our company that we think are right. So let's come together. Let's put our heads together and see if this is something that we can work on for sort of the greater good. So I think that's been really exciting to see.
All right, let's move to our third topic. And um, I feel like when I introduce this one, it's automatically going to trigger thoughts about what's going on in the United States right now, and that's not how it's meant, right? Which is to say, we have a little bit of a moment here that is being um, created by a bunch of forces. So let me just introduce it. Over the last several months, I inhale, right, a lot of industry news, and as companies are releasing their annual financials and their annual sustainability reports or early warnings to them, we are seeing some companies reach that point where they can tell that they're not going to meet their ambitious near-term targets, right? Maybe it's associated with a science-based target, maybe it's not, but really ambitious targets that they set, and they can tell now that they aren't likely to hit them, at least not in time. And so some companies have been announcing that. Other companies have simply been quieting their talk around their goals. And some are literally just pushing back their timelines. Um, and so I guess, that's been a dilemma that I've been thinking about for quite a while, which is we want everybody, right, to be setting ambitious climate targets. But ambitious, almost by definition, means we might not hit it, right? Or else is it ambitious, right? If we know exactly that what we're going to do and we're going to get there, and right, that there's a tension. And so, um, what I'm wondering is how you guys are feeling about your own progress toward what might be medium term or longer term goals or hopes or ambitions that your companies have. Um, and do you need those hard and fast long-term goals to sustain momentum or not? Um, and do you worry about what might happen to companies who set these ambitious goals and then, um, or even if not goals, right? They've put themselves on a path, or their industry is on a path, and they don't think they can hit it, right? And what will happen to them as a result? And so, in any case, so Chris, why don't you get us started? How is this?
Yeah.
How are you guys
It,
thinking about this?
it is really interesting times right now, and I think that collectively, a lot of us kind of all went through a journey that started around 2014, with the climate, the Paris Accord, kind of the climate challenge task rose to the main stage. We all saw that, and there was this phase of what I call kind of pledges and promises that emerged, where everybody did exactly as you said, like set the ambitious goals, net zero. It was almost a race to like who can get there first with their goal. And then we all kind of went to work and started trying to figure out how we're actually going to do this, and we realized it's hard. Like these are really hard problems to solve, and so I do see like a global recognition that this more, maybe it's more of an understanding and appreciation for how difficult this climate challenge is. And so I think we've transitioned now from this era of promises and pledges into an era of performance and progress. So it's becoming more about, I believe at least, more about, are do you know what your footprint is? Are you transparent with what it is? So what is your performance? Are you taking steps to take action? So I believe that setting targets was an important first step. I believe that if now your program exists because you have a target, that's a dangerous place to be. Now, having that goal, having that target can be useful, can be helpful. Like externally, when we set our commitment to match every hour with locally produced clean energy instead of kind of the conventional annual measure, that was a really ambitious goal, and we still have that goal today. It's a 2040 goal, but having that goal externally enabled me to connect with my suppliers and say, look, I have a goal. This is my goal. I need your help to solve this. And so the goal became very useful because it helped the conversations with the ecosystem that we're going to need to lean on in order to help us achieve that. So really important to have the goal. And internally, I think the goal is good to have because when it does get difficult, it brings everybody back to the table and has the tough conversations that says, is this still the right goal? What do we need to do? But just that act of bringing people back in together and focusing on this, I think has a ton of value. All that to be said, we're actually on track with our goals. So I'm not in the kind of difficult, awkward position to say, well, maybe we need to rethink this. We're 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 continuing to find the opportunities and use innovation and make progress. And so I'm in a comfortable place today. But I see value in having these goals, and I also recognize, because we're starting to get in some difficult areas, that just the fact that we have the goal isn't reason enough to go do something. Like we still need to kind of like internally assess and say, is it the right goal or not? And I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think generally speaking, there's more appreciation for companies that have set goals and tried and come up short than there is for companies that maybe didn't set a goal in the first place at all. So I think it's still a net win just having a goal and trying to make progress.
Yeah, I completely agree with Chris. I think the one of the main purposes in my mind of having the goal at all is so that your values as a company have a seat at the table for the conversation, right? So even if you're not going to hit it, that means you're getting all the leaders in a room to have a conversation about why and what are the trade-offs and how do we continue momentum as a company and continue to be profitable so we can afford to do the things that we know are going to make a difference and make impact. And then what are we willing to compromise as a company? And it forces transparency around that conversation with those people in the room, but also with the rest of your organization and frankly, with your consumers at some point.
Let me I want to provide a little bit of air cover, right? By and also share a little bit about 3 degrees. So so we set a science-based target using the small to medium business method, right, which is a prescribed target that you just essentially sign up for. You don't, there's no, that there isn't the intense validation exercise that larger companies need to go through. And we did that knowing that we did not know, well, first of all, we, the targets that we are required to hit are all, we've already hit them. So it was kind of a non-issue from that standpoint. But that 2050 target, we don't have any idea really how we're going to hit that. Now, to be clear, our emissions are trivial. Our scope 1, 2, 3 all added together is like 1,500 tons, something like that. I mean, they're a flea on top of many companies' footprints, but nonetheless, we like to do what we can, and the problem is we can't do very much, right? I'm looking at some of the generators of our footprint. Actually, we we buy our single largest pie slice is cloud services, and um, and I and I, as much as we are definitely helping a lot of cloud services companies reduce their footprint, but that doesn't make ours go down very much in the scheme of things. And so, I'm definitely I feel the pain, right, of saying I really want us to achieve our ambitious target, and I don't know how we're going to get there. And I'm really conscious of how much time and effort it's worth or not worth for me to spend on it. I don't know. So Joel, you had muted yourself a little while ago. Did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal itself is super useful. Like having that goal like guides those conversations, gives your values that seat at a table. And I think that, it's one of the things that I would question some of the commitment to a lot of larger public companies when they set those goals. Like you see like a Shell oil company or like, like some banks like have all recently walked back their net zero commitments. It really felt like when they did it, it was just the flavor of the day. And so like I think there's a big question when someone sets a goal if they can actually attain it, or like even if that they even mean to, or if it's just kind of like a cover for kicking the can to kind of buy yourself some PR in the meantime. That being said, there's definitely companies that are doing the right thing, but I think one has to be skeptical and critical, especially if like oil and gas companies. Like I don't believe any of them have any promising sustainability goals. So um, you know, yeah. So kind of not all goals are created equal there, but our own goals, we did some pretty heavy analysis to get to them, and we found some pragmatic projects that can help get us there. And explicitly didn't commit to net zero because we can't do it, and we think it's worse for the planet in the long run. Like if we stop building bikes, like is that really a good thing? Probably not. So um, yeah, I mean, goals should be put in context and under scrutiny. So
Yeah, I'll just say it really does kind of I'll just say question, and I mean that honestly. I don't have I don't know the right answer. The um, balance between the momentum that I think, Chris, you were talking about, that all of the companies suddenly seeing climate as a really important uh, arm of their, not just their sustainability platforms or programs, but of their business for the first real time, in the mid of the last decade, um, and really wanting to be part of the momentum and part of that team and to create um, a wave, right, that other people can ride, and balancing that against what the practicalities of this are we doing a disservice if we can't actually hit it? Does it make it look like we're all greenwashing, right?
Yeah.
In
Well,
our
and
intentions.
that's an interesting way to phrase it, kind of right that way, because I think also something that's I think of as a positive thing here in this kind of landscape of goals being pulled back a little bit. There's the reality that we are very connected in this space. My scope 1 and scope 2 is somebody else's scope 3, and vice versa. And so it's not like every company can operate in a silo and say, we're just going to not have these goals anymore, because those companies have customers and their customers are relying on them to have a certain level of performance and progress on this. So, in the landscape where things are, I think, being rationalized and recognize how difficult the challenge is, but I view it more as maybe rationalization of a lot of goals, which I view as positive. And I think that recognizing that a lot of what we do, for example, at our facilities is really aimed at enabling customers to achieve their goals. That's why we're doing the clean energy purchasing that we're doing with deep decarbonization. That's why we're building green buildings. It's actually less. It's kind of like 3 degrees. It's kind of less about us and our footprint, and actually more about what we do and how our knowledge can help our customers achieve theirs.
Yeah. Andrea, I think what you said earlier resonates with that, right? That part of your business thesis, right, is that you have a better way, right, for people to deploy cloud services, right?
Yeah,
For your
there's not an easy answer for that question. I mean, AI is out of the toothpaste is out of the tube. I don't see us going back, and it's such a double-edged sword because of what I do in my position. I attend sustainability conferences, right? Like, I just got back from Greenbez last year. You can't attend a sustainability conference without hearing about AI. But at the same time, we're certainly, data centers and cloud providers and the energy that's required to power those things, and water and other resources. You have to find a way to manage, and evaluate what's important, what's not. And, I guess find a way just to do it better, and you think about, somebody asked me on the Q&A, they said, how can efficiency coexist with humanity and human outcomes, which is inherently inefficient? I couldn't begin, number one, to type an answer to that question, so I thought I would take that live, by the way. But when you think about the term efficiency, it's considering the amount of energy, the input in, and then the output that comes from it. So, for example, to Joel's point, we're going to keep making bicycles. Yes, it's going to have a footprint, but we believe, Trek believes, it's going to ultimately have a better human outcome.
Right. Yep. All right. So let me introduce one more theme, and then we'll pause for the Q&A. So I want to open up the conversation a little bit, because I feel like we have a bunch of super smart people from very diverse businesses. And so I'd like you to just share something that you've discovered, or that you have that in your work that you're passionate about, and that helps you in your role. Like, whether it's an insight that you've learned, a technology, a program that you've developed, something that you're excited about. And Julia, why don't you start?
We are very excited about everything that's happening with regenerative agriculture right now. And for somebody who makes a food product, the focus has really been in previous years about reducing your footprint or offsetting your footprint. But, I think the incredible thing about regenerative ag is it has potential to actually revitalize the planet. And so starting to think much bigger picture like that is super exciting. I think a great example of that, we work with a company called Terviva, and they are a ag innovation company. And basically they work with farmers all over the world to produce a climate resilient crop called Pongamia trees. And these trees support reforestation in the areas where they grow. So they can grow anywhere, and they basically support reforestation. And very conveniently and lucky for us, one of the sites of one of these big farms is on the North Shore of Oahu. So we got to kind of see this in action. And basically they can take the beans from these trees and press them into oil, and it becomes a super sustainable alternative to vegetable or seed oil. Really, really cool. So they've been doing this for a while. 3 years ago, we launched the first commercial food product that featured this oil. We use a little oil in the bars as like a binding agent. So we swapped out the oil for this Panova oil for this Kona bar that we launched. And actually since then we've launched 3 new bars that have featured this oil as well. So I'm really excited about it because to me it's an example. It's not an insignificant change, but it's a small change we made to our recipe that has potential to make like pretty incredible impact for our business and actually improves the product as well. So I think it's a great example of kind of mutually beneficial, everybody wins. And if you think about just a few other food companies, maybe even some of the bigger ones making that swap, it could have like really, really incredible impact on the industry as a whole. So those are the kind of things that get me really excited because all of a sudden it doesn't feel so like far out of reach, right?
Let me ping it. Let me ping it back to you, Andrea. What do you see? What are you excited about? You're smiling, so there's something behind that.
No, there's so much going on. So I was talking about, you know, AI and double-edged sword, and you can think there are so many great things that AI is doing to combat climate change. One of my favorite things to do, if you guys, there's this app, it's called iNaturalist. And you can take photos and help with ecology and biodiversity, and it's literally like crowdsourcing just biodiversity and how climate change is impacting, you know, flora and fauna.
I have recently become obsessed.
It's
with
fun, right?
iNaturalist. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm a big user.
So
Never heard of this
there's
before. Wow.
yeah, so there's things like that. And then, you know, again, you kind of start to get in the doldrums about you know, um the impact. And then I just think about, you know, like my company and what we do and how literally we help customers, you know, actually, Joel, I don't know if you know this, but Trek is a Nutanix customer. And we ended up in their data center, we were able to help shrink their footprint by like 75%. And that ended up helping them save on cooling and power and stuff like that. So, you know, I try to be optimistic when I think about it. I like to think that we'll continue to do better and hopefully be smarter and just find different ways, you know, to make. I'm sorry, I'm so stuck on tech, but that's where I end up. But even, you know, Chris, to your point, you know what PUE is, right? It's called power usage effectiveness, and it has to do with the ratio of power going into the data center versus how much is actually being consumed by all the servers and stuff. And the more you play with that number and make it closer to perfection, which is the number one, kind of you're mitigating how much damage you're doing essentially on the environment. So just continuing to find ways and working with our customers and partners and data center providers to just help kind of take the edge off the massive problem we have.
Yeah, I guess I'll just the energy. So what I'm excited about is a couple of things. The energy efficiency is that you mentioned, Andrea, is one of those. If you take a look at the amount of I'm going to get this stat wrong, but I'm going to try. The amount of internet traffic that existed about 8 years ago or so, and compare it to the amount of traffic happening, you know, a couple years ago, because the study is a couple years old. Over that period of 5 or 6 years, traffic went up by sixfold, like 600%. Energy consumption has effectively stayed flat. So, like the amount of energy efficiency in our data center world here, where Andrea and I live, has made tremendous strides, um, and that's really good because we're going to start using a lot more traffic on the internet. We're like these AIs, yeah, it's going to be a big load, but it's also going to be a big lever for change. So I'm super excited about what AI solutions are going to enable us to achieve. I think it's probably mind blowing. But the other more personal thing that I've really gained an appreciation for over the last couple of years that still holds true today is just the pure power of a bunch of little things done many times, and how it can build up to phenomenal change. When I started in the energy space for Iron Mountain, I was doing energy efficiency work at our non-data center facilities, just replacing LED light bulbs or replacing T12 fluorescent light bulbs with LED light bulbs. Like I literally went around counting light bulbs for about 2 years. And, every single one may have saved a couple of watts, but you add it up and it reduced energy consumption over 20% for the non-data center business. Like it adds up to a lot. So that's my two things. AIs will do great things for us. And there's just so much value in like minding the little things.
Joel, what about you?
I've kind of lost track of what the initial question was. What am I
Well,
excited about?
tell us
Maybe?
something tell us something that you've discovered that is working for you
Oh
that you're
gosh.
excited about.
Um, the thing I can't kind of take my mind off of is I've started reading on these transportation networks and like I mentioned, road transit is probably the largest single source of emissions in North America. And if you look at like our buildings, our roads from the sky, our parking lots, like they're massive, and the reason they got that way was basically because of a bunch of arbitrary laws that were put in place. And so when I look at like the biggest barriers to the adoption of someone riding a bike to their destination, walking to their destination, taking a bus, train to their destination, it's that it's not really safe to do so. And then you also realize it's not really safe to take a car most places either. Driving is by far the most dangerous thing anyone does on a regular basis. And all of these problems are caused because we've designed our, public spaces to be so completely dependent on vehicles. And it's so when I look at Trek's advocacy work, I think that's something that I become very, very excited about. Um, and so, you know, it, when you kind of paint that vision of what a sustainable future in your head looks like, it doesn't look like everyone taking an individual vehicle to go drive it in some gigantic parking lot that displaced a wetland or forest and then, walk 5 minutes into the store or whatever it takes to get, and then you come out with a huge amount of stuff because you have your giant vehicle and then you got to bring it back home. So I feel like that's not the future that I would anticipate for transportation. So.
And you guys and Trek does quite a bit of advocacy, right? That's one of your
Oh yes, yeah, for
pillars.
sure.
Yeah.
We are the main supporter of a group called People for Bikes, and they do this thing we call the Great Bicycle Infrastructure Project, which is we have a list of 20 shovel-ready projects in every state. So anytime that there's a kick, like if there was transportation funding that wasn't allotted for whatever its original purpose was, or were originally allotted for that funding, and we can kind of go out to lawmakers and be like, hey, can we have that to build this, because we're ready to go now. So that's a great thing for us. That's what I'm super excited about.
Okay, I think timing is working out perfect. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and people can still write more, but let me go ahead and address the couple. Not I'm going to address. I'm going to read them. A couple that we have. Um, the first one, because Chris, you mentioned at the beginning about how you appreciated being able to bring your own values to your job as you moved into the sustainability role. The question is, how did your personal values um, affect your choice to join Iron Mountain? And I understand this may be you have to pull your cobwebs out of your.
I started with Iron Mountain over 33 years ago or so. So I've been around for a long time. And honestly, I didn't come to Iron Mountain because of that. I came because of a job. I just needed to work. While I went to school. But more recently, my reference earlier was an opportunity. Really, the sustainability role kind of became available. Like it was still relatively nascent, and there was an opportunity to transition from the operations part of the business over to the sustainability role. And I've grown up outdoors, Boy Scouts, skiing, hiking, climbing, all that's fun stuff. So that was my connection. Is like, oh, this sustainability thing, which, in my mind at the time, it's the green thing. I hadn't fully appreciated the fact that the good for the planet thing was actually also good for business, which I understand today. So it tricked me. It got me in there thinking I was going to be just doing good for the planet stuff, but I ended up doing good for business stuff too in the end. So, but that's what it was just the opportunity to connect my love for outdoors with opportunities to have a lower environmental footprint.
Um, let me read the second one, which anyone can then pop in to provide a perspective. It says, do you have any advice for companies struggling to overcome perceived risks, primarily with shareholders, but I would say it also applies to consumers and other stakeholders of companies, the risks of being transparent about the challenges or backslides on their climate journeys generally, um, especially um, considering the value that those stories hold, and the need to educate consumers and the broader sustainability community. And I'll just say this touches on the discussion we had earlier, where there is, you know, it's not a straight line, right? And so um, how do you explain or be transparent about your progress when it isn't always up and to the right?
So I'd like to take this one from the cynic's point of view. And if anyone has read about the United Airlines Employees Union pension lawsuit that happened recently, what happened is that the pension was considering ESG factors in its investment, and that was deemed by a court to be, um, you know, outside of the fiduciary responsibility of whoever administered the accounts. And so they had to pay a whole bunch of damages to the employees. And, that was, you could see the logic behind that, but it's also just like a real slap in the face to any attempt at sustainability by a public company. Um, and that's going to continue to happen because it must, like if, and I think that speaks to the need of policy and regulation, specifically like carbon pricing, emission trading schemes, extended producer responsibilities. You know, while the cheap thing to do is the thing that is also, uh, unsustainable, that is going to be the outcome that happens because anyone doing sustainability would be taking a competitive disadvantage to their peers and then eventually go out of business or be litigated against. And that's just the reality of how it's going to be. And so there's really this huge need for, especially in the public space, that policy to come through and try to change things. Because I mean, like, you're not going to overcome those perceived risks because those perceived risks aren't risks. They are like very material, negative effects on your competitiveness.
Yeah, let me give a little bit of context to that because we've thought about this a lot. So there are like replacing your T12 fluorescents with LEDs, that is a win-win, right? You get better light, you don't get any flickering, it uses less energy, it saves money, at least over time, it's a win-win. All of sustainability is not like that. There are plenty of things that we really need to be doing that don't look win-win, that they cost more, or they have technology risk, or they require large investments up front, even if in theory they pay back over time. I'm not sure how many people have the time. Like literally, like how long are you going to be in that house? What do it's it's not always win-win. And so a couple of you, right, have talked about the ways that your founders or the nature of your business is sustainable as part of its brand promise and part of its the passion and the intent of the founders. But as companies get larger, that becomes less possible. And I think that's part of what the person is noting is that when you become a public company, sometimes you let go, like that sense of control and passion, until you get to be the size of Apple, when Tim Cook can do, whatever he thinks is best, which we're all thankful for. you know, it's a real struggle. And so um, I'd just be curious if any of the rest of you actually struggle with the struggle. And it's actually a skill, I think, to know when to push, right, for something ambitious or aggressive or that's going to cost some money or that takes a risk, and when not to. And sometimes the answer is not to.
Yeah, I mean, Erin, I'll add to that. I actually think Chris hit the nail on the head when he answered the last question too, which is you have to show how it's also good for business. And that's not always easy to do. And you know, my background is in brand building. And so I think you can do there's a lot of research out there that shows that building trust with the consumer is good for business over time. And that's obviously like a very sort of blanketed approach to it. But I would encourage you to use other companies as benchmarks and look out there, see other studies that exist, because people have done a ton of research on this just to try to show how that trust matters, especially over time. And it matters for growing your brand, but it also matters for defensibility in the long run. So those would be the two things I would say to go and look into, and try to find some other proxies that are within your industry, within your category, that you can use in examples and hold up.
Yeah, and I was gonna just say, maybe even test the perceived risk and be transparent. You know, in this space, I'm often surprised how understanding peers are. And while I've had to have some, you know, maybe uncomfortable conversations, at least everyone understands where you are, and you know, it might offer a better perspective, or you might actually learn something, or gain access to better information or a relationship or a way to actually solve the problem.
Yeah, transparency is the currency of trust. So to your point, Julia, it's like that's the only way to build it. And I think not having transparency in your performance is not a sustainable business practice. Like it's been you could have like security through obscurity for a long time, but ultimately at the end of the day, increased regulation, reporting requirements, these numbers are going to have to not only be available, you have to know your numbers and you're going to have to share them. So it's not, it wouldn't be sustainable to not be transparent. I think for many companies, every company is different, but I think that's a general theme.
Yeah, I'll just say then that's not just a B2C thing. And Chris, I think that's what you're echoing that too. We certainly find, and it's definitely an overtime kind of thing, but building a reputation, whether it's reputation for excellence, reputation for honesty, a reputation for not taking people to the cleaners, um, it pays back. It's one of those long-term investments, and not just with your customers, but with employees and the people who you're asking to have these interactions. Okay, I'm looking at my clock and it's almost the hour. So I think we've answered the active questions here. So I think we'll go ahead and wind down. Let me thank everyone for let me thank you guys for coming and having this conversation with me and with our audience. Let me thank everyone in the audience, whether now or live or later watching the recording, for being with us. And let me just ask Caroline in the back, is there anything else I was supposed to make sure I said that I haven't said?
I think you covered most of it, Erin. Thanks so much. The one thing I just note is that there were 5 other sessions today as part of Climate Day. So those will be published on the website, and everyone can check those out if they missed any of them.
Yes, everyone will get an email with a link to those, and we encourage folks to click in and take a browse. So, thank you all for being here, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.